Possibly the figurehead monster for all of D&D is the Beholder. It has a storied history that strikes fear into the hearts of players when they're run correctly. I see many DMs who aren't quite sure what to do with the Beholder stat block, so I want to give my perspective of what the Beholder is, at least in D&D 5th edition. We won't be going over lore in this video, we're just going mechanical usage of the stat block. Now, if you just want to hear me talk about how do you run a Beholder in combat, just go to this timestamp right here, but otherwise, let's get into it. Really, the point of this video is making sure we get the vibe of a Beholder. We're able to set our session up, set an adventure up to fully take advantage of what the Beholder does well. Firstly, let's talk about its regional effects, because I think that these are some of the most underutilized things about a Beholder. One of the regional effects is that the party always feels like they're being watched, which can spark some incredible paranoia. While the regional effect doesn't necessarily say that the Beholder can actually see you, I run it as when you are around the Beholder's lair, the Beholder is watching the party at all times. It has nearly omniscient knowledge of what they're doing. This helps them fend off any plans that the party might try to bring up against them and makes the Beholder feel like a genuinely terrifying foe. Also, just having a very high passive perception character constantly feeling like there's something there and that their passive perception being so high is letting them pick up on it very acutely is a great way to mess with a player. What I do is that when they eventually say, can I roll perception, can I find this thing? I go, yeah, and at the end of it, I simply say, you definitely know you're being watched. Leaving it at that makes them terrified. A Beholder also has reality warping powers. Their dreams just can create new things out of thin air. So using that, make things weird. Maybe the Beholder's been having a rash of nightmares and the trees just sing. Mountains can vanish overnight. The entire place that the Beholder is in can be warped into this terrifying eldritch landscape. Really, the Beholder's reality warping powers allow you to be as creative as you want as a DM, because it's literally the Beholder's imagination creating things. And it can also give you a great way to explore the psyche of this particular Beholder. What are they thinking of? What are they dreaming of? It's a great jumping off point for roleplay. Now let's discuss the Beholder's lair. I think this is one of the most important things that we have to get right when we're talking about a Beholder. Because one, moving through the lair of this monster, this aberration, needs to be difficult. That's almost a challenge in and of itself, because the Beholder can fly. Their tunnels can be straight vertical. So, for a party to move through this place is going to be, again, a challenge. And Beholders can also put traps basically anywhere they want in this lair, because usually you have to be walking on the floor to hit a trap, but the Beholder can fly, so it will never hit its own traps. Basically, think about this when you're creating a Beholder lair. The average soldier, the average town guard, should have an exactly 0 chance of getting through this lair. A Beholder is not stupid. Narcissistic usually, yes, but not stupid. So have them create truly devious death traps. A Beholder will also have a lot of minions. So that's another point that you have to think about. How do the minions move around this space? Are there certain areas that are filled with traps that are Beholder only? Are there certain minion only chambers within this lair? What types of minions does the Beholder have? Have they enslaved a group of goblins? Are they more a death tyrant lich who has tons of undead? Do they have an orcish warband under their control with promises of glory and conquest? Or maybe they just took some innocent people from a local town and are basically charming them and enslaving them into doing their bidding. The types of minions that your Beholder has also heavily influences the party's perception on what this Beholder is. Does your Beholder treat their minions well or poorly? Because a Beholder, again, while narcissistic and usually very evil, can still treat the minions well, even if it's thinking, I'm only treating them well for my own self-interest. I'm giving these minions food and water and riches because then they'll be more loyal and they'll fight for me harder. Or maybe the beholder just doesn't care and kills off minions for fun, turning them to stone, disintegrating them, whatnot. But each one of those decisions that you make has a big impact. So take your time creating your beholder's lair. I would say that should be a large chunk of the overall time that you spend developing your beholder, because a beholder dungeon can be fun for multiple sessions if you keep things fresh. It can have multiple areas, multiple levels, changing tones and play styles radically with each different place that you throw in. Entering into the main part of the dungeon can be a session, going through the minion quarters another, and then the last part of this triumvirate being the actual place where the beholder dwells itself, full of death traps and weird eldritch corridors. So yeah, don't skimp on the lair, because that is one of the most fun parts of running a beholder. And now let's talk about building the feel of a beholder. And I'm running off of the old pre-errata notion of a beholder. Obviously, this does not have to be how you run your beholder. There can definitely be good beholders out there. But if we're running an evil beholder, a beholder that the party is coming into conflict with, at least a villain beholder, I think these are good starting places for that. To start off, a beholder encounter should be special. This just isn't a creature that you find roaming about a random dungeon. Your party should hear about a beholder, hear about its exploits, its plans, and really get built up to fight this creature. Beholders have status and legendary prowess. You wouldn't have a party randomly run into a Tarask, so why would you do the same with a beholder? Make sure the build up to the meeting is equal to the payoff. Canonically, beholders are also insane tyrants and narcissists. I like to model them after Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, that kind of narcissistic me personality, or Kurtz from Heart of Darkness if you've ever read the book or seen the movie. Beholders usually think they're gods. And why wouldn't they? They can literally warp reality to fit their own sense of self. So perhaps show minions or people worshipping the beholder, because if the beholder can create things out of nothing and warp entire realities, the average goblin or peasant or whoever is probably going to agree, yeah, this thing is a god. This thing can warp reality at its whim as it dreams, so I'm just gonna worship it because it's an angry god and I just saw it kill Toby last week, so I don't want to get on its bad side. Because really, when we look at the base stat block of a beholder, we can see that they are remarkably evil. I mean, let's just take their eye beams for instance. You have a fear beam that causes terror, you have a charming beam, so that could probably be how they get a lot of their minions. Minions under the effects of the charm would be, again, like just terrifying. It's a stripping of free will. Not to mention a petrification beam, which literally turns people to stone, an innervation ray, a disintegration ray. All of these just point towards some really bad conditions that the beholder can create. So perhaps consider how you can show not only the beholder's eye beams at work and how they're being used, but how they affect others. I once had in one of my beholder lairs a room of statues, and the entire room was beholder minions or people that crossed them that the beholder turned to stone using a petrification beam and just stuck in there. And every day, the beholder would lead its minions throughout this petrification room and show them, this is what happens when you cross me, when you defy your god. And that really set the tone for the rest of the dungeon, because the players got to see, oh man, this beholder means business. And not only does it punish the minions, that it is also showing them what would happen if they defy him. It is a creature that thrives on terror. And after meeting a few sympathetic minions, the party was more than ready to beat the shit out of this beholder. And I think here's a good place to transition into talking about how we run beholders in combat. Here is the beholder stat block, and firstly, it tells you to roll randomly for the eye beams. And I'm here to say, don't fucking do that. Just have a checklist of eye beams and make sure that you don't repeat any eye beam during the round. Go through as many as you can in a fight, but don't go choosing the eye beams randomly. Instead, roll the beholder targets randomly. Well, semi-randomly. Choose one enemy that the Beholder is going to attack and then just roll the rest randomly. This makes for a lot better feeling Beholder boss fight. Because it sucks if you randomly target the 3 health wizard and then all of a sudden the random eye beam comes up and it's a disintegration. We want to try and avoid those situations. It also gives you means to at sometimes throttle back. Maybe the party is about to TPK, so you randomly target the paladin, but you throw a fear ray at them, and because they're immune to being frightened, they're fine. Or you throw a charming ray at, let's say, the cleric with a +10 wisdom save, and they're fine, they're not charmed, so it just artificially allows you to tone back the combat if you need. Let's also talk about the Beholder's central eye, its anti-magic cone, and for this, lock down a spellcaster. Now when I run this, I still have it as a cone, right? The eye beam still is a cone shape, but I like running it where the Beholder can constantly watch one target. So wherever that target goes, they're in the middle of the cone of vision. The Beholder can switch their target at the start of a turn if they wish, but I think this makes things a bit more dynamic. Because if they're a powerful spellcaster, they can then walk themselves next to the rest of the players because the Beholder's eye beams can't go within that central eye. So they can kind of protect everyone. Players can hide inside the anti-magic cone this way. And so this would force the Beholder to target someone else completely or just close that central eye. Basically, it makes combats more dynamic, more mechanically interesting, and to be honest, more fun. Next tip, a Beholder combat is only as good as its battlefield. Have spaces that a Beholder can fly into and hide. Maybe there are tunnels along the sides of the arena or in the ceiling. Remember the traps that we talked about earlier. Floor traps can be completely avoided by the Beholder, so think about having those. And you need to keep this in mind because Beholder does not have high AC and it does not have a lot of hit points. The ability for it to fly and its lair are its defensive strategies. If you have a lot of magic users, for instance, have a little alcove that the Beholder can fly into, and so it can look straight out and cover the entire battlefield, so no magic users can get behind them, for instance. Have pits so that the Beholder can separate itself from any melee characters. Use the battlefield to be the Beholder's defenses. And for that matter, keep the battlefield moving. The location of the fight cannot be stationary, because if that happens, the Beholder is slowly going to get surrounded. If you're trying to throw a Beholder against a high-level party, you have to make sure that it can move, hopefully throughout the layer. So again, it is a moving battlefield. You start in room A, move to room B, and at room C is when the battle ends. And trust me, this is going to keep things super dynamic and super interesting. Finally, make sure that your Beholder fights with minions, because a fight without minions is going to leave it so that the Beholder is going to be focus fired, and no matter how good its tactics, no matter how good its lair, the party is going to find a way around those defenses. That's why your Beholder needs minions. Minions are a wall of bodies. They're not really designed to do damage. They're not designed to have any mechanical significance. Really, just a bunch of zombies could be enough. They are there to eat up attacks and make sure that players can't just run right up to a Beholder. They are there to draw fire. They are there to prevent movement. Some of the best minions I ever deployed was when I had a Beholder and the players were supposed to fight them around level 10 and they got to level 17 without ever fighting this Beholder. So the minions that I set up were a bunch of basically animated armor. Not very difficult, but they all had the sentinel feat, so the party couldn't just run by them. They would hit them and lock them down. So they had to deal with the minions and then go and finally finish dealing with this Beholder. Yes, they were a super powerful party, but the minions made all the difference. And if your Beholder still isn't deadly enough, or you want to change things up because maybe this group of players already in the last adventure fought a Beholder, there are variant combat abilities that can be found in Volo's Guide to Monsters. Not all of them are great, but I'm going to go over and tell you the ones that you should probably change if you want to make your Beholder fight more challenging. Get something out of the way, never change the anti-magic cone. I think that it ruins the vibe of a Beholder fight because that's what a Beholder is most known for, so keep that anti-magic cone. Let's go to the Charm Ray, and instead of having the Charm Ray, you can go with a Confusion Ray that lasts for a minute or until they save. And Confusion is going to wreak a lot more havoc on average than the Charm Ray, because Charm just makes it so you see the Beholder as a friend. You can still help your party, but that Confusion Ray can completely take people out. The Disintegration Ray. Now, the Disintegration Ray normally is one of the most powerful rays, but you can switch it up for a Chain Lightning Ray, and this is great because it's an AoE. You can hit almost the entire party, for most party sizes, with one I-Ray blast. This is super powerful and can change the dynamics of a battle very quickly. Next, for the Innervation Ray, take Polymorph instead, and you're not trying to polymorph other party members, you are trying to polymorph the Beholder's own minions. Imagine they have a bunch of small little goblins around. The party doesn't make much note of them, and then the Beholder shifts an I-Ray towards them and turns one of the goblins into a mammoth. Now you got trouble on the hands. Now the party has to really start taking out these goblins, wasting their attacks and spells on them, because the Beholder can keep on turning them into mammoths and more powerful beasts. And then if push comes to shove and all the minions are dead, you can still turn one of the party members into a turtle. The Fear Ray. Now, you should probably keep this unless your party likes spells like Polymorph or transforming spells, and in that case, take Moonbeam to shunt them out of whatever form they were once in. It is super unexpected, and I've had the party use Moonbeam enough on me, so I can use Moonbeam on you. Obviously, if polymorphing is a huge part of their strategy and the party really wouldn't know what to do without polymorph or shape changing, probably don't take Moonbeam because that would seriously cripple them, and a Beholder is a tough enough enemy as it is. But yeah, all the other I-Beams keep the same because they're great, and I don't think their variants are any better than what is already out there. If you like this video and want to hear me talk about more monsters, check out this one right here, and thank you for entering the dungeon.